Funding for the art show was made possible by Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District, the Virginia W. Kettering Foundation, proud supporter of the arts in our community, and viewers like you. Thank you.
In this edition of the Art Show, Dayton's West Side birthed the music phenomenon.
We wanted to celebrate not only the musicians and their creativity, but also the fact that they made a major impact on popular music.
Quilt making acts as a common thread.
I don't care what race or what region of the country I'm in. I don't meet strangers in the quilt making community.
Art that bursts from gallery walls.
When a viewer sees themselves in the work, they become very, very hyper-aware of their relationship to it.
And an artist whose every tile mirrors a piece of nature.
That's where I go to photograph and document and try to capture something that doesn't have the traces of man.
It's all ahead on this edition of The Art Show. Hello, I'm Rodney Veal, and this is The Art Show, where each week we bring you stories of local, regional, and national artists and arts organizations. The ice cream cone, the inkjet printer, and the mood ring were all invented in Dayton. Many also claim funk music has its roots in Dayton, and local artists paid homage to it in this year's annual Visual Voices exhibit.
Each February, the Victoria Theater Association partners with Ebonea Gallery to present Visual Voices at the Schuster Performing Arts Center in downtown Dayton. Visual Voices was launched in 2007 to showcase local African American artists with works based on the theme of Dayton skyscrapers.
Dayton skyscrapers to us is not tall buildings in our skyline, but African Americans from this community who stand tall in our minds and heart for what they've achieved in their field and given back to the community. So we've been doing a series of Dayton skyscrapers and just wanted to make a variational change. And this year we decided to take another part of great Dayton, and that is funk. And so we challenged the artists to revisit all the funk music that came out of Dayton in the late 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s and create a piece of art that has the same feel and the same funkiness as a piece of music. Selecting Dayton funk music as a theme was an easy choice because that's a gem in our community, and we wanted to celebrate not only the musicians and their creativity, but also the fact that they made a major impact on popular music that is still impacting the music today. What is funk music? You know it when you hear it, and you know it when you feel it. It came through the black experience, which is rooted in African sensibilities and that urban reality. It's powerful, it's energetic, it's whimsical at times. Nothing's is more whimsical than the funky worm, or a jive turkey.
Funk is stinky, smelly, sweaty, gritty music with deep bass and drums. But most of all, it's fun with the K on it. It kind of blows your troubles away because you start, just getting into the moment of that beat. And next thing you know, you're moving, your booty's shaking a little bit, and you're like, what was I worried about? And good funk would do that. I grew up right across the river, a train stop away from New York City. So we would go to Madison Square Garden, me and my crew, to see the Ohio Players and Heat Wave. I remember standing in the rain and a line around the block to see a Slave, a group from Dayton. Lakeside, we would go and see all these bands, and they would just set New York on fire. And when I moved to Dayton, it took me about a year or two to realize, oh my God, I had no idea all these musicians came from Dayton.
In 1959, a band formed in Dayton that would later become the Ohio Players. They had 7 top 40 hits between 1973 and 1976. And even though they were world famous, they continued to live and make music in the Miami Valley.
Then, from the Ohio Players, We have nephews, we have other musicians in town who starts forming groups. And then you get groups like Slave, Phaso, Lakeside, and the Wilder Brothers, who went on to form Heatwave and Platypus. But you have to give so much props to the Ohio players staying in this community while they were at the Grammys and performing on Soul Train and going to Europe and Japan and being, world famous, but coming back home to Dayton.
Because many times when some people make it, the first thing they do is leave and go buy a big house on the hill. But these musicians came back in between performances around the world, and you can see them down the street. You see them at the playground. You see them at the mall. You could talk with them. You could touch them. That made it real. And it spurred other young people. If they can do it, we can do it. I want to be like Sugar. I want to be like Diamond. It just grew. It just grew. So there must be something in the water. There's something about Dayton that we all can tap into and be extremely proud of what it can nurture.
The 2014 edition of Visual Voices, titled Visions of Dayton Funk, kicked off with a concert performance by the Dayton Funk All-Stars and the Ohio Players. This special evening began with a traditional West African libation ceremony and a proclamation by the mayor of Dayton from the Schuster Center stage.
During the 70s and 80s, funk groups from Dayton amassed more than 110 singles appearing on the music charts. That's right. So, now therefore I, Nan Whaley, Mayor of the City of Dayton, recognize all those who have contributed to the Dayton funk music legacy and do hereby proclaim February 9th, 2014 as Dayton Funk Day in Dayton, Ohio.
When those house lights went up, we didn't know what to expect in terms of an audience. To have 2,000 plus people come down around Dayton Funk, something that is ours, that we've shared with the world. The show just turned out to be just one of the best we've ever experienced.
It was packed. I didn't expect both balconies in the Schuster to be full for this event. It was diverse. I mean, everybody in the community was there. It was white and Asian and Latino and Black, and it was magical. And this gives the city a taste of what it would be like if we really took this music and gave it its just due and used it as part of our legacy with the Wright brothers and Paul Lawrence Dunbar, all the historical people that came out of here. If we added funk to that, Dayton really has something to be proud of. Just like Nashville is famous for country and Chicago's famous for blues, I think a lot of fans would come from all over to visit some of these historic places, or meet some of these musicians, or hear these stories here in Dayton. This history lives in people's memories, but there's not anything besides, our record collection that we can touch.
Currently, the only physical reminder of Dayton's funk music legacy can be found at the intersection of Salem Avenue and Catalpa Drive. A sound sculpture by local artist Michael Bashaw was installed in 2012 on the site of the former Troutman Sound Labs. The 26-foot-tall sculpture is topped by tone rods that play a few bars of I Can Make You Dance When Moved by the Wind. But plans are in the works to establish a Funk Hall of Fame and museum on Dayton's west side, to celebrate the past as well as educate and inspire future generations. In the meantime, the sounds of Dayton Funk are alive and well on the airwaves each Friday night when public radio station WYSO takes its listeners behind the groove.
WYSO 91.3 Behind the Groove on a funky Friday. What better place to have a funk show but in Dayton, Ohio, the capital, the international, intergalactic capital of funk music. And we're going to set it off with some funk from Spain, Barabbas, and of course James Brown coming up this hour. The feedback and the love that has come back from the listeners in the community has been tremendous. I've gotten emails from people in Arizona and Indiana and Virginia and New York and say, hey, we found your link to your show, YSO.org, and we listen every Friday night. You can hear some really great B-sides, and not only the Ohio bands, but some historic funk singles and 45s. Scholars, fans, and people that love music do recognize the Miami Valley as being this really special place where this type of music took hold. It's important that right here in the Miami Valley that there is on our radio airwaves a place for this homegrown music to be recognized. I think it's an awesome opportunity.
The Wright State University Archives is currently collecting Ohio player and funk memorabilia for the Dayton Funk Museum. Like the Funk Hall of Fame and Museum on Facebook to get updates. Put Visual Voices 2015 on your calendar now. It'll be back around in February. Many might agree that Ohio Heritage Fellowship Award winner Carolyn Mazlumi has mastered the art of quilt making with her intricate and often political pieces. Not only has she pushed the boundaries of the craft, but she has also helped unite others who share her passion for this particular folk art.
A self-taught master quilter, Carolyn Mazlumi's first quilting attempts didn't quite live up to her own critical eye.
Initially, when I started quilting, my quilts were very traditional patchwork quilts. And when I made these quilts, the angles never met. The corners never met. They were terrible. And for an engineer, it's bad when the lines don't meet, you know, you can't get a straight line together. This is why I started making applique or collaged quilts. I told my husband I was going to start making quilts, and I wanted to make this a vocation. And he says, well, nobody's gonna be interested in buying quilts. Finito.
20 years later, Carolyn's quilts have been exhibited all over the world and are found in prominent museum collections like the Smithsonian. Needless to say, her quilts are in demand. So just what makes Carolyn's quilts so special?
I like telling stories. Stories are very important to me. Most of the quilts that I make deal with the status of women or deal with music, because I love music, especially jazz. But more so for me, I like telling the stories of women around the world, not just women here, but women around the world. One of my favorite quilts is Strange Fruit. This quilt deals with Billie Holiday and her singing the song Strange Fruit, which really was an anthem. It was the consummate protest song, Strange Fruit. So I chose to depict that in a quilt. About a decade ago, there was a book written about lynching, and this is what the song Strange Fruit addresses, lynching in this country.
When Carolyn first started quilting, she realized as she went to quilt exhibits, quilt shows, she never saw any African-American quilters. She did not see African-American quilts. And then she began to understand that African-American quilt makers were not joining the guilds, the quilt guilds that had been set up by white quilters for mainstream art production. So she realized that African-American quilters needed their own organization and needed their own context in which to produce their very distinctive art.
This prompted Carolyn to found the Women of Color Quilters Network.
We have a chapter here of the Women of Color Quilters Network here in Ohio. And it's just like all the other chapters. We quilt together. We present at museums and galleries around the state and around the nation because we're a part of the larger national group. So always for me, it's about finding new quilters. And every time I find one, it's like a hidden gem, a discovery, because there are so few of us.
For all of her accomplishments, it's no wonder Carolyn was one of the first recipients of the Ohio Heritage Fellowship Award, an award honoring Ohio's master folk artists who do work in their communities to make sure these traditions stay strong.
An Ohio Heritage Fellow is really a culture bearer, someone who advances the field of her particular art form, which in Carolyn's case is quilting, and does so by promoting it, by educating audiences about it, by discovering and encouraging new artists to come into the field.
My legacy is my art and the story of my people.
She has helped the African American community, in essence, by saving what was a dying art.
Not only does the quilting needle unite the women involved in the Women of Color Quilters Network, but I always say, as I travel the country, and I travel a lot, I've never met a stranger in the national quilt community. We're all united through the thread of the needle. It's the art form that unites us, and we're not strangers. We're sisters in the spirit of the cloth.
Dr. Mazlumi has curated an exhibit for the National Underground Freedom Center in Cincinnati. The beautifully handcrafted quilts featured in the exhibit, and Still We Rise, were created by an international group of artists from the Women of Color Quilters Network and narrate the history of the African American experience. For more on Carolyn, visit her website, carolynlmazlumi.com. Jonathan Latiano is a Baltimore, Maryland-based installation artist, creating works that seem to lunge out of the floor or emerge from the ground. Playing with themes of environmentalism and extinction, Latiano's exhibitions explore what it means to be temporary, both in form and in presence. Let's take a look.
They talk about this thing in sculpture where sculpture ends at the floor. How do you make someone hyper aware of the space around them so that you begin to talk about this idea that it doesn't end at the floor, that maybe it continues? Installation art is sculpture that you can walk into. It's an immersive environment. It's one of those things you happen upon it, and all of a sudden you're inside of it. I do have things really emerging out of walls and ceilings and floors. Things, kind of like exploding out. This kind of like organized chaos. I like this kind of pairing of art and science, specifically fields of science that deal with large expanses of time. So geology is a huge one. Evolution, extinction. I'm just dealing with these really important things that are happening in science of the day. It happens to be very dark, but it's not so much as me being an activist as me being is trying to capture those really sad moments, these really ephemeral or fleeting moments within the world that's going on around us. I'm attracted to salt, which shows up in so much of my work. I just use table salt, just regular table salt, because it's incredibly refined. As it evaporates, the salt begins to rebond, and it forms these really beautiful, intricate patterns, so it's physically growing, even if it's just by 0.5 millimeter. Mirrors are extremely important to me. When a viewer sees themselves in the work, they become very, very hyper-aware of their relationship to it. This also idea of the atmosphere, the sky, being such an important visual element, because I'm taking that, right, and I'm really just shoving it down, scrunching it up into the ground. During the day, it was really bright. If it was cloudy out, it'd be this kind of gray piece. If it was sunset, it would be this really kind of nice, almost cool pink on the inside. And then at night, which ended up being my favorite time with the work, it was just this black rock. It's just kind of, again, this back and forth, these really earthy materials versus these really artificial materials. Plastics and resins and styrofoams, these things that have a half-life of 10,000 years before they begin to decompose. Because even the artificial materials, they're beautiful. They're staggeringly beautiful. So many things in our ecosystems and things, entire ecosystems and things like that are collapsing right now. And then they will be gone. When something is extinct, it's pretty much, that's it. Most of my work has this life cycle. It'll exist for 2 weeks or a month. Once I deinstall it, it will not be shown again. And so that's one of those things, it's like whether the viewer likes this piece or dislikes it, or they agree with it, or they hate it, or whatever, I mean, it only exists just for this moment. There is so much beauty in that fleeting moment.
Did you know that there's a Dayton Society of Painters and Sculptors? Visit DaytonDSPS.org for local artists. Exhibits are held throughout the year and include 2 major shows in the spring and the fall, along with other invitationals and juried opportunities. Finally, artist Dixie Frengay is making the airport a calmer place, one mosaic at a time. Here's a look.
When I was in graduate school, I was studying roots of religion, and I traveled a lot in Europe, and I was just blown away by the mosaics. They could be 2,000 years old and still be as vibrant. And when I turned 40, I said, okay, this is what I'm doing. I want to make big work, really large work, and I want to work with the mosaic. I'm interested in preserving that parts of nature that are still left. You know, those little pieces of land that we have that's original. That's where I go to photograph and document and try to capture something that doesn't have the traces of man. When I was working on the Houston Bayou, I was down in the bayous in the kayaking. Started doing sketches, did preliminary thumbnail work, did small little paintings. And then I did the large painting, which is, I think, about 20 feet long. And I used the fabricators in Cuernavaca, Mexico. I took my painting down there and we actually drew it off on large sheets of paper, then cut the paper up, and then they look at my painting and interpret it in glass. This dragonfly has 24 karat gold in it, so I've got a lot of iridescent qualities that the dragonfly has, and it was a lot of fun to work on getting the fabrication just right on that. Why mosaics work so well in a public space, because from a distance they can appear to be a painting or an image that you can see, and as you walk up to it, it becomes almost like confetti, and it breaks up and becomes very abstract. When I did the Port of Miami, it's called Ephemeral Everglades, and I spent weeks hiking and kayaking and boating all through the Everglades to try to capture that vastness of nature. I spent a month at the prairie at a certain time of the year for Indianapolis and really being intimate with it to understand the shape of the plants and the birds at that particular time of year. The Dallas airport I just finished in March. It is 18 feet high and 64 feet wide, and it's of the prairie in the springtime, so it has all the native flowers in bloom. And it has a lot of handmade ceramic in it, and it also has something new that I hadn't done before is we have bulged out some of the flowers so they're three-dimensional. All my newest work has handmade clay tiles in it. The first piece that I did with my own ceramic pieces was called Strata, and it's in the Woodlands. The next piece I did was for Texas A&M, and we did the benthic zone all here in my studio. What my process on these smaller pieces were, it's kind of going back to the surrealist, where they would do a print, and then they would find the message in the print. And I knew I wanted to work on the cellular level, the atomic level. So I played around with that organic shape and those colors. And working on these small pieces really changed the color of my palette. It became much brighter. The hours of solitude and placing the tile and stuff was so zen, which is addictive. It's a wonderful place to go.
In addition to the Houston and Dallas airports, Gaze mosaics can be seen around Texas and the country. To learn more, visit DixieFriendGay.com. And that wraps it up for this edition of The Art Show. Take the time to enjoy all the arts and culture that surrounds you. Until next time, I'm Rodney Veal, and thanks for watching.
Funding for the Art Show was made possible by Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District, the Virginia W. Kettering Foundation, proud supporter of the arts in our community, Ohio Arts Council, Ohio Humanities Council, and viewers like you. Thank you.